All right, everybody, my next guest is an Emmy award-winning reporter and the co-host of 2020 on ABC. He's also the author of this fascinating new book on the 9/11 plot, The Cell. Please welcome John Miller. I didn't get back to the desk fast enough. That's never happened.
I'll sit down slower next time.
Yeah, you got right into your seat. The band quit, because I guess they're paid by the second. And I was like 30 feet from the desk. Very awkward. It should never happen. We'll talk about the book, which it's fascinating now that we're really starting to figure out exactly what happened on that day and everything. We'll talk about that in just a second. But I wanted to ask you, you built your career, you really cut your teeth covering the mob. You spent a lot of time covering John Gotti. And since I saw you the last time, he passed away. Is there any way you can sum up his character in any way for us?
Yeah, in the context that, of course, he was a gangster and that he was responsible for numerous murders and ran a criminal empire. That part seriously. Aside from that, he was very much, I guess, whatever it was like covering Al Capone in the 20s, that's what it was like for me covering John Gotti during that time. And he was tough, he was stylish, he had the clothes and the aura. I remember in particular, after he was sentenced to life in Marion prison, he was so tough, he never lost his sense of humor. Here was this guy convicted of all these murders, of running this criminal empire. He wasn't afraid of the FBI, he wasn't afraid of the mob, he wasn't afraid of any other man.
People said that he wasn't even very fearful when he was, dying eventually of cancer, that he didn't seem to, he seemed very tough in the face of that.
Fearless to the end. There was one thing he was afraid of, which very few people knew about. He was deathly afraid of flying. And he always took the train down to Fort Lauderdale and, took the train back. And here they have him with shackled in front, leg irons. He's taking these baby steps.
And they're taking him off to prison.
They're taking him off to prison, and they get him out of the van. He doesn't know where he's going. And they bring him onto this airfield at LaGuardia Airport, and there's this small government propeller plane, and he's taking these baby steps in the leg irons, and he suddenly stops, and the two U.S. Marshals jerk to a halt, and they look at him, and he says, "Hey, maybe we could get the judge. You think it's too late to say I'm sorry?"
It took that, yeah.
But that's what I mean. He had a sense of humor that way.
You listened to, yourself listened to a lot of wiretaps in all the time that you were covering the mafia. Do you ever hear anything that just struck you as funny when you're listening to wiretaps?
The mob, this was organized crime, the creme de la creme of the criminal world. So, of course, you'd listen to these wiretaps, and they were heavily coded. But sometimes you realize these guys really weren't much better than anybody else. Early on, I heard one of the tapes where they were always using code words to define a kilo of heroin. And the one code word that came up the most was the guy would say, "Hey, Tony, how you doing?" He'd say, "Pete, what's up?" He says, "I got a cousin from Toledo in town wants to buy some of those shirts." I'd say, "Oh, yeah, we got shirts." He says, "These shirts, how white are they?" He says, "They're very white." He says, "How much are you getting for these shirts?" He'd say, "About $2.50 each." He said, "Hold on. My cousin says he'll take 3.5 shirts." There was one...
Slight flaw in the code, yeah.
Well, no, I mean, you're sitting there trying to crack this code because, they're the very best.
Right.
Like the time I was sitting in a trial once, and there was an allegation that one guy was trying to sell some other guy contraband, and he says, "Hey, how you doing? I'm going to meet you at the place. You're going to bring the ting, right?" He says, "Yeah, I'm only going there to give you the ting. What, am I going to show up without it?" He says, "No, I just don't want to go all the way out there if you ain't going to have the ting." He says, "All right, don't say what the ting is on the phone." He says, "Okay, don't forget to bring the bullets for the ting either." So no, they don't make them like that anymore.
Right.
They found two guys in the trunk of a car at Kennedy Airport last week with their heads tied together.
That's how all funny stories start this way.
Yes, it is.
I got another one. They find these guys, and they've been burned with acid. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, it's just exemplary of, how the mob's looking for new help. Their heads were tied together. They were shot through the back of the hands. They're really not up to par anymore.
Now, moving on.
In the back row, they're starting to get that one now.
Oh, they get it. They're just angry.
Take it easy. I saw your monologue.
Hey! Whoa!
Now I'm never going to make it out of here alive.
I was about to get you back, and then I noticed there's a police shield on your ring. So I'm going to leave you alone. You were on the show in January, back when we were friends. And no, you were on the show in January, and I asked you, because you were one of the last people Western journalists, you're one of the only Western journalists who ever interviewed Osama bin Laden. You're one of the last to see him and talk to him. You were the one that he told he wanted to, declare war on America. You said at the time in January that you thought Osama bin Laden had been killed in the bombing at Tora Bora. Do you still feel that way?
I felt that way at the time because he was off the radar screen and he hadn't sent out another video. There had been no new threats. And this is a terrorist leader who had certainly a sophistication about how to use the media and a bit of an ego, too. But now, I now think he's alive because it's been too long. There's a $25 million reward out for him, dead or alive. Afghanistan is a place rife with warlords and militias, and there's U.S. patrols and special forces, and no one's come up with a body or any sign of a body, despite that reward. And it appears that certain elements of al-Qaeda, his group, still have command and control. So I'm now going on the assumption that he may well be alive and still in control. Okay, the other question I had for you is you were just in Afghanistan, weren't you? That's right. How recently? Just probably three and a half weeks ago. Okay, well, the president, Hamid Karzai, there was an assassination attempt, and it was, I guess, thwarted because he has not only his own bodyguards, it was one of his, I guess, bodyguards or someone in his unit. Actually did the shooting. Who did the shooting, and he has American protection. He's protected by U.S. Special Forces. They're operating in plain clothes, but, they're a bunch of crew-cut guys with sunglasses and M16 machine guns with laser sights on them. So they're not exactly undercover. Yeah. They probably stick out there a little bit. Yeah. A little bit. Yeah. Do you think that's a situation that is going to... I mean, is this an example that that's a situation that's going to deteriorate the minute America pulls out? Or do you think there's hope that that government can actually get up and going and be a sort of endemic part of that country? When I was there, I asked that question to General McNeil, who was commanding U.S. forces there. I said, if you pull out here, what happens? And he said, we need to build this country an army. It took the United States 200 years to build the army it has now, and I think it's the finest. This was him talking. He said, I need at least 2 years with my trainers and people to formulate this one. I asked the same question to Karzai, and he said, if America leaves, if the U.S. forces leave us on our own here, this all falls apart. Because he's challenged by rival warlords, the remnants of the Taliban, al-Qaeda forces, and political forces that would like to take over the government. Yeah, that's an extremely complicated problem. And I should mention this book, The Cell, it's an excellent account of what happened, not only that day, but more importantly, how this situation, how we got to that situation on 9/11 and sort of how we were led up to what went wrong in American intelligence. It's really a detective story about the investigation that led up to 9/11 and how so many important clues were missed and what was wrong with the system. Okay. The Cell is in bookstores now. 2020 airs Friday nights at 10 on ABC. John Miller, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good to have you. We'll be right back with And You Will Know Us by the Trail of Dead. You got to hear the...